He came home earlier than usual, expecting silence, but what he heard stopped him cold. From his son's room came laughter, real laughter, the kind that had once filled this house but had long disappeared. His little boy, who could barely move on his own, was laughing again. Thomas Anderson stood still in the hallway, his briefcase still in his hand, his heart heavy with confusion. For months, all he had known was silence, therapy sessions, and tears he never let anyone see. But now, in that quiet mansion, he was hearing the one sound he thought he would never hear again. Slowly, he began walking toward the room, each step slower than the last, unsure if what he was hearing was real. The closer he got, the clearer it became. That soft laugh, that innocent joy, that miracle sound. His hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. He pushed the door open slightly and froze. What he saw made his chest tighten. There, on the floor, was Lucy, the maid he barely noticed most days. She was kneeling beside his son, her hands moving gently, her voice soft and calm. Ethan's small legs were shaking as he tried to lift them, and she was right there, guiding him, whispering, "You can do it, little one. I believe in you." Thomas stood in silence, unable to breathe. His son, who could barely move, was lifting his legs, smiling, laughing. And the woman helping him wasn't a doctor, not a nurse, but the maid he had hired to clean the house. He didn't know whether to be angry or amazed. All he knew was that something was happening in front of him, something that made no sense but felt too powerful to ignore. And in that moment, without realizing it, his life began to change. For a long moment, Thomas stood frozen by the door, watching in silence. His hand was still on the knob, his breath uneven. He could not understand what he was seeing. The maid, Lucy, was on her knees beside his son, moving the boy's fragile legs with such care that it almost looked sacred. Her voice was soft, steady, and full of patience. "Good, Ethan, very good," she whispered with a small smile. "Let's try again, but this time, don't rush, okay?" Ethan nodded with determination, his little face tightening as he tried again. His leg lifted slightly off the floor, shaking in the air. Lucy's hands stayed under his knee, guiding but never forcing. When the leg finally dropped, she clapped quietly and said, "You did it, sweetheart. That was better than yesterday." Thomas felt a lump rise in his throat. His son was moving his leg, something the doctors said might take months. And the one helping him wasn't any of the expensive therapists he had hired, but the maid he barely spoke to. He stepped back slowly, afraid they would notice him. His mind was spinning with questions. What was she doing? Where did she learn that? Why hadn't anyone told him? He leaned against the wall, trying to steady himself, but the sound of Ethan's laughter reached him again, soft and real. It broke something deep inside him. When was the last time he had heard that sound? He couldn't remember. His wife, Laura, came quietly behind him, holding a cup of tea. "Thomas?" she whispered, startled to see him home so early. He turned quickly, pressing a finger to his lips. "Shh," he said softly, nodding toward the half-open door. She looked past him and saw what he saw. Lucy and their son, sitting on the floor surrounded by pillows, the maid's hands gently massaging the boy's legs as she spoke words of encouragement. Laura's eyes softened. "She has a special way with him," she whispered. "Since she started helping around, Ethan has been different, happier." Thomas frowned, his jaw tightening. "Helping around? You knew about this?" Laura hesitated, lowering her gaze. "I didn't want to interfere. He's been making progress. You can see it yourself." Thomas looked back into the room, confusion written across his face. Progress? Yes, but how? And why did this woman know exactly where to touch, how to move, how to make Ethan focus without pain? He stepped closer, this time not hiding. Lucy noticed him and froze. The color drained from her face as she quickly lowered Ethan's legs and stood up. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice shaking. "I can explain." Thomas's tone was calm but cold. "Explain what I just saw." Ethan looked between them, frightened. "Daddy, please, don't be mad at her," he said. "She's helping me walk." The words hit Thomas harder than he expected. Helping me walk. His son said it with so much faith that it made his chest ache. Lucy swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "Sir, I didn't mean to cross any lines. I just wanted to help." Ethan was sad. He was losing hope. I couldn't watch him like that. "Who told you to do this?" Thomas asked, his voice still low but sharper now. "You're not trained for this. You could hurt him." Her eyes filled with tears, but she held her ground. "I know what I'm doing, sir. I learned these methods from taking care of my younger brother. He was born with the same problem. I helped him walk again." Thomas blinked, his anger fading into confusion. "Your brother?" "Yes, sir," Lucy said softly. "His name is Marcus. When we were little, doctors told my mother he would never walk. We couldn't afford good care, so I learned from watching, reading, and practicing. I tried everything until something worked. Now he runs, he even plays soccer." For a moment, the room was silent. Only the quiet hum of the air conditioner filled the space. Thomas looked at his son again, sitting proudly on the floor, hope shining in his eyes. That look, that small spark of life, was something he hadn't seen in months. "You had no right to make that decision without telling me," Thomas finally said, his voice breaking slightly. "You should have asked." "I know, sir," Lucy whispered, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I just didn't want to lose the little progress he was making. I thought maybe, if I could help him move a bit more, you would see he still has a chance." Ethan looked up at his father. "Daddy, please don't be mad," he said again. "She's nice to me. She believes in me." Thomas's throat tightened. He looked at the boy, then back at Lucy, and for the first time, he didn't see a maid. He saw someone who cared, someone who was doing what none of the professionals could. But pride held him back. He turned to leave the room. "We'll talk about this later," he said quietly. Lucy lowered her head, whispering, "Yes, sir." That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing Ethan's laughter over and over in his mind. Something about it wouldn't let him rest. There was truth in that sound, something real, something he hadn't given his son in a long time. At dawn, he walked down the hall again and stopped outside Ethan's room. He opened the door slightly and watched. The boy was still asleep, his legs wrapped in a soft blanket. On the desk, beside the bed, was a notebook filled with careful handwriting. Thomas picked it up. Each page had notes, drawings, and progress dates. Day 12. Ethan lifted his leg for 4 seconds without help. Day 15. Tried balance practice, less shaking. Day 18. He smiled again today. Every line was written with care, with love. Thomas closed the book slowly and stood in silence. He realized then that the woman he almost fired might be the only one who truly saw his son. But part of him still didn't understand who she really was or why she cared so much. And as he left the room quietly, one thought stayed with him, heavy and clear, like a whisper in his mind. "There is something about this woman I don't know yet." Thomas sat at his office desk that morning, but his mind was not in his work. Numbers on the screen meant nothing. Every time he blinked, he saw that image again, Lucy on the floor with Ethan, his son smiling, his weak legs moving with strength that should not be possible. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. It made no sense. How could a maid know these things? How could she do what trained doctors couldn't? By noon, he gave up pretending to work. He closed his laptop, grabbed his coat, and drove home early again. The mansion was quiet when he entered. He heard faint music coming from the kitchen. Following the sound, he found Lucy cutting fruit, humming softly to herself. Her sleeves were rolled up, her apron tied neatly. For a moment, she looked peaceful, like someone who had nothing to hide. When she saw him, her knife stopped in midair. "Mr. Anderson," she said nervously, "you came home early again." Thomas nodded, his eyes sharp but calm. "Yes, I did. We need to talk." Her hands trembled slightly as she set the knife down. "Is it about Ethan, sir?" "It's about everything," Thomas said, taking a seat at the counter. "Yesterday, I saw something that I still don't understand. You're helping my son walk, but you're not trained for that, at least not from what I know. So tell me, Lucy, Who are you really?" She hesitated, glancing down at her hands. "Sir, I told you, I learned from caring for my brother." "I read your notes," Thomas interrupted quietly. "The ones in Ethan's room. You've been keeping track of everything, every movement, every exercise. Those are not the notes of an untrained person. That's professional work." Lucy froze. She had not expected him to find that notebook. Thomas leaned forward, his voice lower now, almost softer. "Where did you learn that level of skill? Tell me the truth, Lucy." She stood still for a moment, breathing slowly, then finally spoke. "I studied, sir. I went to New York State University on a scholarship. I finished a degree in physical therapy 3 years ago." Thomas blinked, his eyes narrowing. "You're a trained therapist? Then why are you working here as a maid?" Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "Because no one wanted to hire me. Every clinic I applied to said I didn't have enough experience. Some looked at me and said I didn't fit the image they wanted for their patients. I tried again and again, but nothing changed. I needed a job to survive, so I took this one." Thomas felt his stomach twist. "So you've been hiding this from me?" "I wasn't hiding it," she said softly. "I just stopped telling people because it never mattered. Once they saw where I came from, they stopped listening." For a while, neither spoke. The sound of the refrigerator filled the silence. Thomas finally said, "You should have told me from the beginning." Lucy nodded slowly. "Maybe I should have, but I didn't think you'd believe me either." Before Thomas could respond, Ethan's small voice came from the hallway. "Daddy, look what I can do now." Both turned, as the boy walked toward them on his crutches, his steps careful but full of pride. His face was glowing with joy. Lucy quickly wiped her eyes and knelt beside him. "Show him, sweetheart," she said gently. Ethan took a deep breath and lifted one crutch off the ground. He balanced for a few seconds, his little body shaking, then steadied himself. "I did it, Daddy," he said with a grin. Thomas's lips parted, but no words came out. His throat was tight, his eyes wet. You did that?" he whispered. Ethan nodded proudly. "Miss Lucy helped me. She said if I keep believing, I'll walk on my own soon." Thomas knelt beside him, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, son." His voice cracked slightly, the words heavy with emotion. Lucy smiled faintly, then turned away, not wanting him to see her tears. After Ethan went to rest, Thomas remained in the kitchen, staring at the floor. He finally said quietly, "I don't know whether to thank you or fire you." Lucy looked at him sadly. "You can do whichever feels right, sir. But whatever happens, please let me finish what I started with Ethan. He needs consistency. Stopping now could break his progress." Thomas sighed deeply. "You think I don't care about my son?" Her voice was gentle but honest. "I think you love him, but love is not enough. He needs your time too, not just your money." Her words stung like a wound reopened. Thomas stood, turning away. "You're brave to talk to me like that," he said quietly. "Sometimes the truth needs courage," Lucy replied, her tone calm but firm. That night, Thomas couldn't get her words out of his head. He sat in his study, the lights low, staring at a picture of Ethan on his desk. The boy's smile looked distant, almost forgotten. For the first time, Thomas wondered if he had been trying to buy back what only love could give. He opened his laptop and searched her name, Lucy Physical Therapist, New York. The results came up quickly. There she was, smiling in an old graduation photo, holding her certificate. Top of her class. Volunteer of the Year. Thomas felt shame rise in his chest. This woman, who cleaned his floors, was more educated, more patient, and perhaps even stronger than he was. The next day, he made a quiet decision. He called his assistant and ordered extra security cameras installed around the mansion. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he needed to know more. Something about her story still didn't add up. Why did she care so much for Ethan? Why give up her evenings for a child who wasn't her own? Later that night, after everyone was asleep, Thomas opened the footage from the first camera placed near the living room. The screen showed Lucy arriving early, hours before her shift. She carried a small bag, and instead of resting, she went straight to Ethan's room. For almost 2 hours, she worked with him, guiding his movements gently, taking notes after every small success. Then she left quietly, long after midnight, heading out with the same bag. Thomas leaned closer to the screen, frowning. Where was she going at that hour? He decided he needed to find out. The next evening, he parked his car 2 streets away and waited. When Lucy stepped out of the mansion, he followed her from a distance. She took 2 buses until they reached Brooklyn. There, she entered a small building with a broken sign that read, Brooklyn Community Rehab Center. Through the window, Thomas saw something that made his breath catch. Lucy was surrounded by children in wheelchairs, braces, and walkers. She was teaching them, laughing with them, helping them stand. Every movement she made was filled with care. Every child looked at her as if she were their only hope. Thomas watched silently from outside, unable to move. The woman he thought he knew was not just helping his son, she was changing lives. And for the first time, he felt truly ashamed of how he had judged her. Thomas stood outside the Brooklyn Community Rehab Center for a long time, hidden in the shadows near the fence. The night air was cold, but he barely felt it. Through the dusty glass, he watched Lucy kneel beside a little girl trying to take her first steps. The child's legs trembled, but Lucy's smile never faded. Her hands moved gently, guiding her with care. "Good job, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice full of warmth. "One more step, you can do it." The girl's face lit up when she managed to move forward. The small group of children clapped, their joy filling the room. Lucy laughed quietly, clapping with them. Her eyes shone with the kind of love Thomas hadn't seen in years. He stood there speechless. All this time, while he was at business dinners and meetings, this woman was here, giving her time and heart to children who had nothing. She wasn't paid to do this. There was no camera, no audience. She was simply doing it because she cared. After a few minutes, Thomas stepped closer to the window. He saw her open her small bag and take out simple homemade tools, plastic bottles filled with sand, rubber bands, folded towels. Everything looked cheap, but the way she used them was brilliant. Each object became a tool for strength and hope. When the class ended, Lucy helped the children line up at the door. Some waved goodbye, others hugged her legs before leaving with their parents. When the lights dimmed and she started cleaning the floor, Thomas walked in quietly. She looked up and gasped. "Mr. Anderson," she said in shock, dropping the mop. "What are you doing here?" Thomas's voice was calm but deep. "I could ask you the same thing." Lucy's hands shook slightly. "Sir, I can explain." "There's no need," he said softly, looking around the small room. "I've been watching for almost an hour. You didn't need to explain. I've already seen everything." She swallowed hard, unsure what he would say next. Thomas looked at the walls, the faded posters, the broken fans spinning weakly above them. "You come here every night?" "Yes, sir," she answered quietly. "Whenever I can. These children don't have access to therapy. Their families can't afford hospitals, so I try to help with what I know." He turned to face her, his eyes filled with emotion. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why keep all this hidden?" Lucy sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Because people don't listen, sir. When you're poor, when you're from the wrong side of the city, they think you're lying. I learned long ago that sometimes it's better to just do the work quietly, even if no one notices." Her words hit him deep. He felt a sting of guilt he couldn't hide. "And after working all day in my house, you still come here, late at night, to do this?" She nodded. "These children give me strength. I see my brother in them, and now I see Ethan too. Every time he lifts his leg or smiles, it reminds me why I started this." Thomas stepped closer, his voice lower. "Your brother, Marcus, right? You said he recovered." A small smile appeared on her face. "Yes, sir. He's doing well now. He's 15. He plays soccer almost every day." Thomas looked around again. "Does he come here too?" She nodded. "He helps me sometimes, teaching the younger ones to move and play." As if on cue, The door behind her opened, and a tall teenage boy walked in, holding a bag of soccer balls. He froze when he saw Thomas. "Lucy," he whispered, "is that your boss?" Lucy turned quickly. "Marcus, this is Mr. Anderson. He's Ethan's father." Marcus wiped his hand on his pants and extended it politely. "It's nice to meet you, sir. Lucy always talks about Ethan. She says he's brave." Thomas shook the boy's hand, noticing his steady grip. "You walk perfectly," he said softly. "I guess that's her work too." Marcus smiled proudly. "Yes, sir. I wouldn't be walking without her." Thomas looked back at Lucy. "You really did the impossible." Lucy shook her head. "No, sir. It's not impossible. It just takes patience, faith, and love." Thomas stayed quiet for a moment, his eyes drifting over the room again. "You could have been a great doctor or therapist by now," he said, his voice heavy. "You have a gift." Her eyes lowered. "Maybe one day," she murmured. "But right now, I'm just doing what I can." Thomas walked toward the door but stopped halfway. "Lucy," he said softly, "you're wasting your talent here. You deserve more." She looked at him, surprised. "Sir?" "I don't know what I can do yet," he continued, "but I promise you this, what you've done for my son and these children won't be forgotten." Tears filled her eyes. "Thank you, sir, but I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because someone has to." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it special." He walked out of the center, but the image of her standing there stayed in his mind all night. That small, run-down place had more life in it than his entire mansion. The next morning, Thomas sat at the dining table, staring at his coffee. Laura walked in, dressed for a meeting. "You came home late," she said gently. "Is everything okay?" Thomas looked up slowly. "I found out where Lucy goes every night." Laura frowned. "What do you mean?" "She volunteers at a rehabilitation center in Brooklyn. She helps children walk again. I saw it with my own eyes." Laura's eyes widened. "She does that after working all day here?" "Yes," Thomas said, "and she does it for free." Laura sat down beside him, speechless. "She's not just a maid," she whispered. "She's someone special." Thomas nodded slowly. "I misjudged her. Completely." That day, he couldn't stop thinking. Every minute, the same thought returned, growing louder inside him. She deserves better. She deserves a chance. Later that evening, he went to Ethan's room. The boy was sitting on the floor, building with colorful blocks. "Dad," Miss Lucy said, "tomorrow we'll try standing without crutches," he said with a smile. Thomas smiled faintly. "Do you like her, son?" "I love her," Ethan said without hesitation. "She's my best friend." Thomas felt his eyes sting again. "She's special, isn't she?" Ethan nodded. "She believes in me when nobody else did." Thomas knelt beside him and hugged him tightly. "You keep believing too, okay?" "I will," Ethan whispered. As Thomas left the room, he made up his mind. The next morning, he would go to Lucy, not as her employer, but as a man ready to make things right. Because now, he finally understood. She hadn't just been helping his son walk, she had been teaching him, and everyone around him, how to stand again. The next morning, Thomas woke up before sunrise. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the soft light creeping through the curtains. For the first time in years, his mind wasn't on work, money, or meetings. It was on one thing only, Lucy. He had spent the whole night thinking about everything he had seen, everything she had done. The laughter she brought into his home, the hope she planted in his son's heart, and the quiet strength she carried in her eyes. By 8 o'clock, he was already dressed. He skipped breakfast, ignored his phone, and drove to the Brooklyn Community Rehab Center. When he entered, the room was empty except for Lucy, who was arranging chairs and cleaning the floor. She looked up, surprised. "Mr. Anderson," she said softly, "I didn't expect you this early." Thomas walked closer, his expression calm but serious. "You never expect people to show up for you, do you?" Lucy frowned gently. "Sir?" He stopped a few feet from her. "You've been doing all this alone, helping children, helping my son, while hiding who you really are. You didn't ask for anything in return." She looked away, her hands tightening around the cloth she was holding. "It's not about asking, sir. I just do what I can." Thomas nodded slowly. "That's the problem with people like me," he said. "We see what others can do for us, but not who they really are. I saw you as a maid when you were the person who gave my son his life back." Her eyes glistened with tears. "Mr. Anderson, please, you don't owe me anything." He shook his head firmly. "You're wrong, Lucy. I owe you more than I can ever repay." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with emotion. Thomas finally said, "I'm not here to offer you thanks. I'm here to change your life." Lucy looked at him, confused. "Change my life?" "Yes," he said simply. "I've already spoken with some people. The city granted permission to renovate this place. It's going to be rebuilt properly. You'll have real equipment, doctors, and therapists working with you." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You're serious?" He smiled faintly. "Very serious. But that's not all. You're going to run it, Lucy. You'll be in charge." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She shook her head slowly, tears falling down her cheeks. "No, sir. I can't. I'm not ready for that." Thomas stepped closer, his voice soft. "You've been ready for years. You just needed someone to believe in you the way you believe in everyone else." Lucy covered her face, crying quietly. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he replied gently. She looked up, smiling through her tears. "Yes, sir." That same afternoon, Thomas called a meeting at his mansion. Laura sat beside him, listening carefully as he shared the plan. "I want to rebuild the center under her name," he said. "Lucy and Marcus Institute for Child Therapy." Laura smiled proudly. "That's beautiful. She deserves it." Ethan, sitting nearby, clapped his small hands. "Can I help, Daddy?" Thomas smiled. "Of course you can, son. You're the reason this is happening." The following months moved slowly but beautifully. The old community center became a bright, colorful building filled with laughter, hope, and life. Lucy worked day and night, training staff, guiding children, and helping families who had once lost faith. Thomas visited often, sometimes bringing Ethan along. The boy, now walking short distances without crutches, loved helping younger children with their exercises. He often repeated Lucy's words to them. "You can do it. Just believe." One afternoon, Thomas stood quietly by the window, watching Lucy teach a small group of children. Her voice carried across the room, calm and full of love. Each child listened as if her words were magic. Laura walked up beside him and whispered, "You changed her life." Thomas shook his head slowly. "No, she changed ours." Lucy turned and noticed him watching. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke, but both knew that some things didn't need words. Weeks later, the Institute held its official opening ceremony. Families filled the hall, music played softly, and children ran across the stage. Thomas stood at the microphone, his voice steady but emotional. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this building is more than a center. It's proof that kindness still changes lives. Months ago, I came home to silence and sadness. Today, I hear laughter again, not just from my son, but from children everywhere. All because one woman refused to give up." He turned toward Lucy. She stood at the side of the stage, tears glistening in her eyes. "She was called a maid," Thomas continued, "but she turned out to be a healer, a teacher, and a hero. Her name is Lucy, and she reminds us all that love and courage can do what money cannot." The audience erupted into applause. Lucy walked to the stage slowly, her hands trembling. She took the microphone, her voice soft but full of emotion. "I'm not good with speeches," she said with a shy smile, "but I just want to say thank you, not for this building, but for believing in me. When people see my skin, they don't expect much. When they hear where I'm from, they expect even less. But this moment proves that it doesn't matter where you come from, only where your heart leads you." The crowd cheered. Marcus hugged her from behind, whispering, "You did it, sis." In the front row, Ethan stood up, smiling proudly. Miss Lucy, you taught me to walk. Now you're teaching the world to believe." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she knelt and hugged him tightly. "And you, my brave boy, taught me never to stop trying." Thomas felt his throat tighten. For a man who once believed money could fix everything, he now understood that true power came from compassion. Months passed, and the institute became a symbol of hope across the city. Reporters called it a miracle. Parents from other states began bringing their children there for treatment. Lucy's name was on every wall, but she never changed. She still arrived early, still cleaned the floors herself when no one was looking, still treated every child like her own. One evening, Thomas drove back to the mansion with Ethan. The boy slept peacefully in the back seat, his crutches resting beside him. Thomas glanced at him through the mirror and smiled. "You did it, son," he whispered. "You really did." When he got home, he stepped into the quiet hallway, remembering the night everything changed, the night he had heard laughter for the first time in months. That single moment had started it all. And as he looked toward Ethan's room, he smiled again, whispering to himself, "Thank you, Lucy." Dear viewers, sometimes life's greatest miracles don't come from money, power, or fame, but from love, patience, and the kindness of one heart that refuses to give up. This story reminds us that a single act of care can change a life forever. Lucy walked into that mansion as a maid, but she left it as a hero. She gave a broken child the courage to stand, and she taught a proud man the meaning of humility and hope. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let it remind the world that kindness still wins, and love still heals. Tell us in the comments what part of this story moved you the most. Don't forget to like this video if it made you emotional. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more touching stories like this. Stories that prove compassion can turn pain into miracles. Because sometimes, the people we overlook are the ones sent to change everything.